We begin this assembly by marking the carrier caps. Because a rear end housing is line bored, the bearing caps must be replaced exactly as they were removed. To make sure you don't reverse the carrier caps during installation, mark them so you know which side they came from. After you have marked the carrier caps, you can then remove the spanner locks from both sides of the carrier assembly. Now loosen the carrier cap bolts so both of the carrier caps can be removed. Now remove the carrier caps from both sides of the third member assembly. For ease of removing the carrier assembly, it's recommended that the spanners be loosened and removed from both sides. The spanners and carrier bearing cups should be placed so you remember which side they were removed from when you begin the assembly process. Now you can lift the carrier assembly from the housing. With the use of an impact tool or equivalent, loosen and remove the pinion nut and pinion washer. Now remove the pinion yoke and the pinion. Now it's time to remove the ring gear from the carrier assembly. After you have removed the ring gear bolts, the ring gear should be pressed off of the carrier. Now remove the pinion bearing with the aid of a bearing separator. Installation preparation. Now it's time to prepare your ring and pinion gear set for installation. During this phase, you will see recommended steps that should be taken before actual installation begins. To make sure your ring gear seats properly, it is a good idea to stone the back of the ring gear to remove any burrs or raised areas. This prevents ring gear cocking or run out. Since the ring gear seats on the carrier flange, it is recommended that you also stone the carrier flange. Before you begin actual installation of your ring and pinion gear set, you should take a moment to verify that you are installing the desired ratio. To determine the ratio, simply count ring gear teeth and then divide by the number of teeth in the pinion gear. For example, 41 gear teeth divided by 9 pinion teeth equals a 4.56 ratio. When you open your Richmond ring and pinion gear set, you will notice numbers etched on them. This is an example of the pinion gear etching. The 471P is the serial number and should match the ring gear serial number. The CD2.800 is the checking distance from the face of the pinion to the center of the ring gear. Here is the ring gear etching. The 471P is the serial number and matches the pinion serial number. The BL.008 is the minimum backlash that is to be used when installing this particular gear set. Before you begin the installation of your ring and pinion gear, you should thoroughly wash and clean all parts and make sure they are completely dry before you start. As we begin pinion installation, it is important that you install your new pinion with the same shim it was removed with. It is also important that a light coat of oil is applied to the pinion bearings. The pinion should initially be installed without a crush collar. Begin the installation by pressing the head bearing onto the pinion gear. We recommend you accomplish this procedure with the aid of a hydraulic press. Next, install the ring gear on the carrier. Like the pinion, this process is achieved with the use of a hydraulic press. After the ring gear is properly seated, install the ring gear bolts. Apply thread locking compound to the bolts before they are installed. Now torque each of the ring gear bolts to their proper settings. Now it's time to install the pinion, the yoke, the washer, and the pinion nut. Now tighten the pinion nut enough to produce some resistance or preload when you turn the yoke. At this time, we turn our attention to setting the correct pinion depth. A mistake that is commonly made in setting pinion depth is the use of a straight edge placed across the carrier cap surface to establish the ring gear center line and subsequent pinion depth calculations. Because rear end housings are line bored after the carrier cap surface has been split, the true ring gear center line is not related to this surface at all, and the actual variation of this surface can be as much as 40 to 50 thousandths. Professional depth setting tools are designed to find the true ring gear bore center line, and therefore their use is strongly recommended in setting the proper pinion depth. Richmond Gear strongly recommends the use of a professional depth setting tool. There are many tools available on the market. Follow the manufacturer instructions for proper use. This is now the time to add or subtract from your shim pack to obtain the proper checking distance. Now we can make final preparations to place the carrier assembly into the housing by applying a light coat of oil to both carrier bearings. The complete carrier assembly can now be placed into the carrier housing. Now install the spanners. Remember to replace them from the same side they were removed from. It is important that you take care not to cross-thread the spanners. If the spanners are not threaded correctly, the carrier caps will not seat properly. Remember here that earlier you marked the carrier caps. Now it's time to install them on the correct side and tighten the bolts. Once the carrier caps are in place, come back and snug the bolts down. On this housing, carrier bearing preload and backlash are obtained by spanner adjustments. Spanners should be adjusted to obtain an approximate 15 inch-pounds of preload. Now it's time to check backlash. To check backlash, set the dial indicator at the heel of the gear tooth with the indicator perpendicular to the tooth surface. Now check the backlash by rocking the gear back and forth and reading the indicator to determine how much backlash is in the assembly. Make a minimum of 3 checks equally spaced around the gear. If the backlash is incorrect and you have too much backlash, the adjustment can be made by tightening the spanner on the ring gear side of the differential and loosening the opposite spanner. If you have too little backlash, reverse this procedure. When you are making your backlash adjustments, it is important to loosen and tighten spanners in equal amounts. For example, if you loosen the ring gear spanner by 1 opening, then the opposite spanner is to be tightened by the same amount. This will maintain the same preload on the carrier bearings. Now it's time to check the accuracy of the pinion depth by checking the tooth contact pattern. To check the contact pattern, a light coat of Richmond marking compound is applied to the ring gear. Now rotate the gear several rotations in both directions to obtain a clear tooth contact pattern.